guys, and welcome to another section of the advanced effects in Blender. So this is what we're going to be making, and just a reminder is that this series is going to get updated over and over. Every time I find something interesting to add, I'll be adding that, similar to what I was doing with geometry nodes. This is the project file for what we're going to do today, and you can see that this is not that difficult to set up. We just have a bottle that is covered in ice. The ice breaks apart in steps, so you get the top part, bottom part, and then so we're going to start with a simple bottle like this. And the first thing we'd want to do is to create a shell around it. That is going to be the ice. I'll just duplicate this, Shift D, and for the duplicate I'm going to use Alt S. Let me turn on my shortcuts here quickly. I'm going to use Alt S. That will push it outwards to make a shell like this. This is what we're going to fracture and turn into different chunks. But we have these intersecting bits. We don't want that, especially if we're going to fracture this. So I'm just going to come in here, use Alt, and then click on an edge loop that is intersecting, and get rid of those intersecting edge loops because they're going to create a lot of issues. I'm also going to come in here and just get rid of all these particle systems. Okay, so just going to dissolve those inside edge loops. Let me see, is this a separate piece? Yeah, let me just get rid of that. Let's push this up. Make sure that it's filled like this. So this is going to be our shell. And if you compare it to the bottle, we have a nice shell around the bottle. Can even just extend it a bit. This is what we want to fracture, but you don't want to fracture it as this, because if we just fracture it this way, by the way, you have to enable the self fracture add-on to have the fracturing. I'm just going to go to quick effects, self fracture, and let's use 100, increase the noise, and let's use on vertices, and I will want this to be in a collection. Let's call these chunks. So if we just fracture this, you will see that these are not going to be shells. They're going to be solid pieces like that, but we want shells. So I'm just going to delete that, go back to the original, and I'm going to give this a solidified modifier so that I can push this in. That way this has a shell, and I can apply this, and now this has an interior. And there is I think, is it a clip node? No, I think I'm remembering Houdini, but yeah, I wanted to show that this is a shell, but I guess you can see that already here. Anyway, so we want to fracture this again. Go back to object, quick effects, so fracture. Fortunately, some of the settings have been saved, and yeah, that's it. We have 100 limits, a noise, and a collection for our chunks, and I'll hit OK, and now we should have shells just like that. So you can see that this is no longer solid. So now I don't need this anymore, but I can just have it in a backup collection. Just call it backup and hide that. So we have our shells, but you can see that they're too big for what I want. Let me turn on random colors here so that we can see them separately. So let's fracture them again. When you want to refracture any geometry, you have to make sure that the faces merge together. For some reason, when self fracture works, it separates the different pieces. For example, you can see how this is separate. If you keep it that way, it's going to create issues when you are refracturing. So let's select everything, tab into edit mode, select everything again, and merge by distance. Hit M, merge by distance, and you can see we have removed 5,000 vertices. Meaning that each of these islands now, all these chunks, is a whole and not separated. So now we can select the chunks again and just go under object, quick effects, self fracture. Don't set the limit to 100 because each chunk will be subdivided 100 times. That is likely going to crash Blender or take a lot of time to break, and we don't need that many chunks. So I'm going to use about 5 maybe. So each of these is going to be again subdivided 5 times, and I need a separate collection for those small chunks. So let me call this chunks small. So these recursive settings are supposed to do what we're doing now, but I find that it's very buggy and usually doesn't give me the results I want. So that's why we're doing this way. So I'm just going to re-subdivide and hopefully things work. So you can see each chunk is getting subdivided a few times and we should be done now. So now I can hide the original collection, and you have to rotate around and see that you have no missing things like this. You can see that this chunk here has not been subdivided very well. So I'm going to come in here and find the original. It should be under the chunks collection. Seems these two make up this part here, the missing part. So what I'm going to do is just select these, delete them, and basically refactor this again. And let me make sure that everything is merged correctly and refactor this. So quick effects, so fracture, and hopefully that's exactly what I want. So yeah, now it's better. Okay, so since we have successfully done that, we can do a quick RBD test by just going under object, rigid body, add active, and let me add a ground plane and give this a rigid body type passive. So if I hit play, everything falls apart, but I'm seeing more here. It seems that when we imported in, so the original bottle had the particle system, because remember we have copied it from another project. So let me get rid of that. And now we have something like that. That's great. If your meshes are just flying everywhere and they are not just falling down, because most of the time that's because these pieces are intersecting. In fact, if I make them intersect by selecting everything and using my period key to get the pivot point, change it to individual origins, and I scale them so that each piece is intersecting with the nearest piece, they start exploding. And if I scale this even further, you get that explosive effect. That's because Blender's self fracture add-on is not very good at fracturing sometimes, so that can happen. But that's actually what we want. We want these chunks to be intersecting. That way they get that explosive effect. Or what you can do is just select one chunk and then select all the others so that we have at least one chunk active. Go to the physics panel, and under sensitivity you have this collision margin. So each of these gets an offset so that when these objects collision shape is calculated, if say this is the original shape here, the collision margin adds padding so that instead of calculating the collision on the surface, it's calculating with some padding. So if your objects are intersecting, you can try reducing the collision margin. That might save you, or you might have to refracture the mesh. Remember, we want that explosive effect like we have here, where chunks push themselves out just like that. So we need these to be intersecting. So you can either scale them so that they're intersecting, that way they push themselves like that, but that won't look good visually, or maybe it will, I don't know, you might want to test that. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing that, I'm just going to increase their collision margin so that their collisions are not calculated on the surface, but a little bit away from the surface. So to do that, I'm just going to select any of the chunks, hold on Alt and tap collision margin, and increase that to maybe 0.1 while holding down Alt, so the changes apply to all the others. Now we get that explosive effect without even scaling up the meshes, which is perfect. And again, you can control how much energy they have by just reducing or increasing the margin. So let's do maybe 0.5. That's perfect. So right now everything is exploding at once. In the next lesson, let's have some control over the different chunks exploding.